So our next speaker is Michelle Martin. She is joined Deep Green Resistance in 2017, has been Women's Caucus Chair of the organisation since 2019. She lives with her son between the mountains and ocean on unceded land of the Dena'ina people in Anchorage, Alaska. And it is incredibly good of her to have got up and been here for at least an hour waiting to speak, because it's incredibly early there in Alaska. Michelle's going to talk about why is Deep Green Resistance an organizational signatory to the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. So thank you so much for coming, Michelle. Over to you.
So Deep Green Resistance is an international organization of above ground activists who are biophilic, meaning lovers of life, lovers of all the diverse life around us, below us, above us, within our own bodies, without whom we would cease to exist. All the beings, the mountains and rivers and oceans, salmon and moose and raven and bears and spruce trees and fireweed and mosses and mushrooms. I'll ask you to fill in the beings that live where you live, that you know, that you love, and that you live with, that you know are part of the life of the land that supports your life and the life of your family. We know that humans are one species in a web of life that is rapidly being shredded apart by the forces of the global industrial economy. There are, of course, ongoing public conversations about what to do about this problem of, for instance, runaway global warming that we know is caused both by the burning of fossil fuel and also by the destruction of the very lands and waters whose bodies are torn asunder so that the carbon that they once held is now in our atmosphere. The scalping of Earth's body and the poisoning of her oceans. There are conversations going on about what are we going to do about this. Unfortunately, though, the conversations tend to center on either consumer choices, like if I use the right light bulbs, or if I take a cloth bag to the grocery store, or if I reduce the amount of fossil fuel that I'm using in my home, that those consumer choices might be the answer. Or another focus might be on techno fixes, on any number of different ideas that if we come upon the right technology, that we can both keep this industrial way of life and a living planet. These conversations that tend to dominate in this realm tie in for me with what Caitlin was just talking about in terms of lies that are repeated over and over again, changing our perception of reality, of what our actual options are, and of what reality we really live in. Those of us who are members of Deep Green Resistance have come to an understanding that techno fixes will not save us. Even so-called green energy, wind and solar, things like this are all things that rely upon the extractive economy, and that really ultimately are not going to change things or to stop the destruction. It's understandable, of course, to want to believe that the only way of life you've ever known, that your family has ever known, that your loved ones have ever known can be saved. It's understandable. That if we only make the right choices ourselves, that we'll be okay. Those of us in this organization really want to come together and have actual adult conversations about this, and get out of the lies of some of the dominant narratives. We're also aware that we don't live in a system of power out of which the powerful can be educated. And those are, might not be a direct quote, but those are words that I take from Leah Keith, who's one of our organization's founders, and too many of you also know, because she's been on these webinars very frequently. And so we know that the wholesale destruction of the lands and waters of Mama Earth's body, the genocide of every matriarchal human culture, these acts are not due to misunderstanding. They are this system working exactly as it's supposed to work. So given the gravity of this situation in which we find ourselves, those of us who are part of this organization known as Deep Green Resistance come together to say no to this culture of destruction. our strategy includes an understanding that, given the gravity of where we are at, acts of underground sabotage to physically dismantle those systems that are causing the physical destruction of Earth are necessary. That said, those who join Deep Green Resistance agree that we are above ground activists. We will not engage in underground work or any illegal acts beyond acts of civil disobedience. But we do affirm the need for such action and hope that there are underground actors out there that are being smart. And we say, don't talk to us who are above ground activists saying these things out loud, and don't, if you're thinking of being an underground activist, say these things out loud. For your safety, for our safety, there needs to be a firewall between any above ground group and any below ground group so that we don't know each other. But we can still affirm the same needs. So that's some of who we are, of what things we say that the most environmental organizations maybe don't say. We know from successful examples of struggles for resistance, like for instance, the fight for Irish independence or the work of the African National Congress in South Africa, that even a very small percentage of the population engaged in meaningful underground work can be effective. And that's especially true if there is an above ground culture of resistance supporting those sorts of actions. The Deep Green Resistance book, it's a book called Deep Green Resistance: Strategy to Save the Planet, it's written by Eric McBay, Lear Keith, and Derek Jensen. It's full of more specifics on strategy for both underground and above ground activists, including things like security culture, which I know there've been webinars here on WDI's webinars specifically about security culture, about the absolute necessity of a firewall between underground and above ground groups. So there's more on all of that if folks are interested in any of that. But as above ground activists, those of us who are in Deep Green Resistance really have a task of building a culture of resistance, a culture that affirms the sanctity of life, affirms our absolute love for Mama Earth, for all of the beings around us that I spoke about at the beginning. And also recognizing that such a culture must say a resounding no to the wholesale destruction of Earth's body that we're witness to, and also must say no to all systems of subjugation of humans by other humans. And this is where the work of Deep Green Resistance and the work of WDI most clearly overlap, in saying no to cultural or political practices that undermine the ability of all members of society to fully engage in that society. And we stand in solidarity with WDI and others who are doing the work that many of you here on this call are doing. I will briefly read out, Deep Green Resistance has 5 guiding principles. Number 1 is the soil, the air, the water, the climate, and the food we eat are created by complex communities of living creatures. The needs of those living communities are primary. Individual and social morality must emerge from a humble relationship with the web of life. Number 2, civilization, especially industrial civilization. And when we say civilization, we're meaning human populations that are dense enough to live in cities and to require the importation of things that will be extracted from other lands. So civilization, especially industrial civilization, is fundamentally destructive to life on Earth. Our task is to create a life-centered resistance movement that will dismantle industrial civilization by any means necessary. Organized political resistance is the only hope for our planet. 3, Deep Green Resistance works to end abuse at the personal, organizational, and cultural levels. We also strive to eradicate domination and subordination from our private lives and sexual practices. Deep Green Resistance aligns itself with feminists and others who seek to eradicate all social domination and to promote solidarity between oppressed peoples. Number 4, when civilization ends, the living world will rejoice. We must be biophilic people in order to survive. Those of us who have forgotten how must learn again to live with the land and air and water and creatures around us in communities built on respect and thanksgiving. We welcome this future. And number 5, Deep Green Resistance is a radical feminist organization. Men as a class are waging a war against women. Rape, battering, incest, prostitution, pornography, poverty, and gynocide are both the main weapons in this war and the conditions that create the sex class women. Gender is not natural, not a choice, and not a feeling. It is the structure of women's oppression. Attempts to create more choices within the sex caste system only serve to reinforce the brutal realities of male power. As radicals, we intend to dismantle gender and the entire system of patriarchy which it embodies. The freedom of women as a class cannot be separated from the resistance to the dominant culture as a whole. So those are our 5 guiding principles as an organization. And as you can see, the last one, number 5, very much overlaps with the work of WDI. As above ground activists, Deep Green Resistance members are engaged in a wide variety of work, ranging from land defense campaigns to feminist activism, to building permaculture systems that can sustain life without industrial inputs, to working on building just and sustainable human societies. I will end by saying that my most fervent prayer always is for each of my sisters, that their gifts flow from them with ease and with joy to bless their lands and their people. And I wish that for each of you, and I and all of the members of Deep Green Resistance are deeply grateful to WDI as an organization, to the individuals that do the work that you're doing, and to all of you women out there who are doing the work that you're doing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We stand in solidarity with you, and we give you great thanks for your good work.